Welcome back, guys, to this new special edition series that I'm very excited to be doing. As you can see, I am on brand. My jumper is written "The Real Mheshimiwa," as it is on all my personal social media pages, and everyone has been asking me what's The Real Mheshimiwa about, and I will tell you about all this in a minute. As you know, we are approaching the general elections in Kenya, and I just thought that it's important for me to engage both your emotions and intellect, because election season is where all reason is sometimes thrown out the window in this country. So I just want to bring some things into your consciousness. So my name is Wanjiku, and I'm the founder of Wanjiku's Eye. And here I discuss the relationship between economic development and governance, so that you can understand, engage, and influence the matters that affect you and I. Welcome to Wanjiku's Eye. So, welcome to the Real Mheshimiwa series. And to introduce this series, I want to tell you who is the real Mheshimiwa. Now, I've noticed something, and I don't know why it's the Kenyan culture, that we have this habit of making idols of politicians. It's become a habit that as soon as anyone declares that they're vying for a political seat, or even after they get into power, they automatically acquire the title Mheshimiwa or Mhesh, and sometimes even when they don't win. Now, Mhesh means Your Excellency or Your Honorable. Now, I want to introduce you to something called social distance in psychology, not in health and pandemics. Now, a mental distance or psychological distance between you and another person happens, for example, like when you give them a title, and it influences how you approach them and your perception of how you treat them, and vice versa. And a good example is in your workplaces. Now, if the company you work for is trying to create a more relaxed working culture with an open door policy, one of the simplest things that they normally do first is they drop the titles. So, such that if I am the CEO and I want my employees to feel more at ease with me, they don't need to refer to me as Miss Wanjiku, they can just call me Susan. And why is this important? It's very important because of the flow of information. Now, my company could collapse right before my eyes as the CEO if I don't have access to information, and I can only get that information if my employees feel comfortable enough to reveal to me the things that are going on in the company that I have no idea about. Then another simple one is in your social circles. I don't know if you've ever had a casual chat with someone, then when they ask what you do and you say, for example, like, I'm the director at X and X place, they're taken aback, and at that point, they even want to start treating you differently. Suddenly they start calling you names like Mkubwa or Mzito. And it's exactly the same thing when it comes to psychological social distance in politics. By referring to them as Mheshimiwa and all other big titles, we create a psychological distance between us and them. So in the process of that, we end up forgetting that at the end of the day, the people you want to get elected into public office, so the people you will vote for, are coming to serve us, and they are answerable to us and accountable to us. And how do you know that they are accountable to you? Just pay attention to this election season again with all the campaigns. Look at the billions and the millions that people are spending in campaigns, and they are just trying to woo you to vote for them. So at the end of the day, you are the real Mheshimiwa. And this is also backed by our constitution. Chapter 1, Article 1 of the Kenyan Constitution says that all sovereign power belongs to the people of Kenya, and this sovereign power can be exercised directly or through democratically elected representatives. So democratically elected representatives are the people you elect after every 5 years, and they are there to represent you and me. So it doesn't say power belongs to the president or power belongs to the deep state or the police. It says that power belongs to the people of Kenya, so you and me. So we are the real waheshimiwas, and for as long as we forget that, our government will continue misbehaving. And that's even why this behavior has gone on for too long. And then another thing that we do is as soon as someone also declares that they want to vie, and again, even after they win, people start asking them for favors. Kuna wale watu wa niachie kakitu, then there's the high level one where you support the candidature of someone if they promise you tenders after they win. So those are guys in their circles. So what other things do we do that make our political institutions worse? Remember that me and you as citizens form part of the political institutions. What are those things that we say or do to make idols of our waheshimiwas? Let me know in the comments. Now, I want to take you back in time where Kenyans demanded and fought to have their power back as a people, because Kenyans remembered that this is our land and Kenya ni yetu sisi wote, na wao ndio waheshimiwa. The first time that this happened was during the fight for independence, where either your parents, grandparents, or great-grandparents, depending on your generation, fought for their right to rule themselves because the European colonialists violently came and took over this side of the Sahara, drew some boundaries and named it Kenya. Then they took away their land, their livestock, and even their agricultural produce. And then they took Kenyans as slaves. And then anyone who attempted to resist was killed. And then it also progressed now into economic stuff. They introduced the money system. And when they introduced the money system, they also introduced taxes in the process, and it was introduced by force. And this meant that Kenyans would have to work as slaves to their white masters, either in the farms or in the houses, or now people had to go and look for work in the city. So that was just throwing our social structure into chaos. And they needed to do this so that they could earn that money so that they could pay taxes, the taxes that had been imposed on them. Then they were also not allowed to farm some crops like tea and coffee, and they were segregated by class and by race. And so we were restricted from attending some schools, being employed in some jobs, living in some neighborhoods, etc.
The ordinary settler really enjoyed being in Kenya. It was a good life. I mean, let's face it, to be rather blunt, you could get servants, and booze was cheap. The Europeans took the view that they were doing the Africans a great favour by being in Kenya. We're jolly good chaps, you know, and you're very lucky to have us here. They were third or fifth class citizens compared to the Europeans. It wasn't racist, it was just, a fact of life.
And as expected, the British colonialists rewarded the Kenyans who were loyal to them, those who reinforced the status quo, or those who didn't challenge the colonial government. And in fact, these Kenyans looked down on their fellow Kenyans because apparently they couldn't see the bright side of being colonized. And I see people making such comments to date, like, why were the Mau Mau fighting and the British were going to leave anyway? So yeah, so Kenyans looked down on their fellow Kenyans because they couldn't see the bright side of being colonized. That even though the government was brutal and corrupt and put people in concentration camps, at least they brought the roads and railways, right? And does that sound familiar to the Kenyan politics of today? Government appointments being made based on loyalty other than out of being qualified, and Kenyans also telling other Kenyans to mind their business, that despite healthcare being inaccessible to very many Kenyans, higher education and even just basic education is still out of reach. Hunger and starvation are very real, and businesses shutting down because of a tough business environment, and then issues of unemployment, insecurity, and demonic levels of corruption. At least we have roads and infrastructure, right? Isn't that what we tell each other? So anyway, Kenyans of that time decided enough was enough, and they fought back with their weapons of choice. Some took the more conservative and moderate route, the likes of Jomo Kenyatta, Harithuku, and others. And then when that wasn't working and they realized that the British actually had no intention of leaving our country, that's where the radical guys came in, the Mau Mau.
Twanyunyaga muma, kana nanyure muma, tukiwa tutigetekera muthungu atuike ni agutura twathaga. Kaba tukue tuthire kugatigara mundu umwe uria ungi ugatigwa ari wegari.
Na tukiwa ni tuvurana na kivanga na vinya uria tungivota nundu Ngai atutethie twiyathe nikio gatumire turwana na vinya muno na twarikia kunywa umwa tondu twanyure muma murito muno tangiatiririkaga ni mundu ayo waguoya.
And the entire fight was actually very brutal, but despite the colonizers having more sophisticated weapons and a bigger army than the Mau Mau had, the British colonizers still saw that this was a real threat to their power. Plus, there was also a lot of pressure coming from within Kenya and also from their own country for them to actually get out of Kenya. And this mainly happened because their own people started to really understand what exactly was going on in Kenya. So all these factors led to Kenya getting its independence. However, even with the surrender, the British colonialists still made sure that the government that was going to take over from them, that's the government of Jomo Kenyatta, and also all other successive governments would make sure that their interests are protected here in Kenya. So after independence, things changed, but they remained the same. Kenyans were hopeful that things would be different and that the system would now work to the advantage of Kenyans to reduce the poverty, unemployment, the illiteracy, disease, and to be given back the land that was taken away from them, and also for Kenyans to be included in economic activities, because remember they were really bottom tier of classes in their own country. But by then, all successive governments in Kenya already knew how to exploit the system that was created by the colonial governments and how to maintain that power, which is what haunts us to date. They learned that they can use the fear, coercion, brutality, and just giving handouts to keep the system as is. Grab public money, steal public money, grab land, punish anyone who dares to challenge the system, and maintain a small circle of people who have power and influence, reward them so that they can fight on their behalf, and also use the police like personal property. And also a president could cherry pick the parts of the constitution that they like and then remove the ones that they don't like. And this included the term limit of a president, the powers that the president had at the time, and Kenya also became a one-party country at some point. In short, it was a dictatorship. However, one thing that colonization did was to introduce formal education in Kenya. And the good thing with education most times and ideally is that education always comes with new perspectives, expectations and exposure. And once again, Kenyans found themselves fighting for liberation and freedom for a second time. So we wanted more rights, to have free and fair elections, to have a country with multiple political parties and not just one, for the president's powers to be reduced, to have public resources allocated and distributed fairly across the country, and for all systems and institutions in the country to be reformed, including the judiciary and the police system. And then also poverty obviously needed to be sorted out. And then the thorn in Kenya's flesh, corruption, which is essentially what prevents Kenya from progressing in all those areas that I've mentioned. And it was a fight, literally. There are protests right, left, and center from lawyers, activists, NGOs, other politicians, university students, etc. So those were all very defining moments in Kenya where people took ownership of their country and said, enough is enough. But 30 years later, things changed but remained the same. In conclusion, guys, if more people were interested in public affairs and actually held the government accountable, imagine Kenya would not be where it is right now. It's like Kenyans have no rest, because decades later we are still fighting for the same issues, which are economic inclusion, unemployment, better healthcare and education, and fighting against corruption. And this is because Kenya has a dysfunctional democracy, or rather Kenya is a dysfunctional democracy. And we'll talk about democracy in part 2 of this series, so make sure you stick around. The guys who are knowledgeable in Kenya's history, please teach us something in the comments. Teach us something in the comments. And I've also created a playlist for you, just so that you can get a raw and the real story of colonialism and the fight for independence and post-independence Kenya. The versions taught in school don't present the facts accurately, so process everything you'll watch. So anyways, as always, thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And remember that you are the real Mheshimiwa, and make sure you share this video so that we can have people who are making an informed decision during this voting season. I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.